we are honored to have Shannon and Erin Longdo with us today. Shannon is the co-founder and the CEO of Pow.bio, an organization dedicated to advancing the development of industrial synthetic biology. And Erin is an experienced diagnostics and life science executive leader with expertise in business, clinical diagnosis, and also life science. Now, so many teams have a truly actionable plan for consumer engagement at each phase of the company with product development. So today, Shannon and Erin will share their insights from multiple markets and dozens of successful and also unsuccessful programs to give direct guidance for advisors, entrepreneurs, and also investors. First of all, can you first give us a definition of what is product market fit and why it's so important?
Sure. Let me get started. So it's one thing to have a great idea, and we have a million great ideas, which is part of the excitement of being part of this ecosystem, whether you're an advisor or a founder or an investor. There's just so much really interesting stuff going on. However, this idea to really have the impact you envision must actually meet somebody's need. And so the most basic definition of product market fit is that you're making something that people just can't get enough of. So you want to be able to have everyone you reach have the same enthusiasm and excitement around your invention, device, medicine, etc., as you see in the potential of it. And it's not always so straightforward. The things that we think when we start this journey can migrate into different things we didn't imagine. There's a really great example in Hinge Health. This company recently made their $600 million round. They're now $6.2 billion in valuation. Pretty impressive road. The team started out with an insight, which is after an injury, physical therapy was really outdated and really not necessarily customer friendly. So they came up with a model for a digital PT solution, digital physical therapy solution. And they immediately set to work cultivating relationships with athletes, because who would want digital physical therapy more than athletes, which was a great start, but it turns out that that wasn't their product market fit. And they started to talk to other folks. Where could it be? How are people thinking about physical therapy? Where is physical therapy a significant cost? And through a series of trial and error, found their way to self-insured U.S. companies that have large employee populations that do a lot of physical work, like Home Depot, or Walmart, or Amazon. And for them, this kind of physical therapy could be a way to mitigate expense and reduce injury. They suddenly had a lot of traction, and the signals that they noticed were that people were quick to take up meetings with them. People wanted to know more about how applicable the solution was. That feeling of momentum picked up significantly. So product market fit is measured by the signals you see. How much are people pulling on you for this idea? How many more people want more information and want to go a little further and want to understand how it can help them? That early reading is an exciting and critical part of every company's journey. And I frame it this way. It's the first compass heading you'll have. You're going to look at this compass over and over again during your development journey. But this first one helps you get going in the right direction.
So as startups, they have tons of things to deal with, and why they have to prioritize this work, and in what way they can do that?
Yeah, so Ella, that's a good question, and I think, you know, if we think about Hinge is the very positive example of what you can achieve if you pursue product market fit, and the other sort of counter example is what happens if you don't. So CD Insights did a study, a postmortem on more than 100 startups looking at reasons for failure. And 8 out of the top 10 reasons listed are all related to product market fit. So the number one reason listed by founders who were not successful with their businesses was actually no market need. So a kind of real miss to the market. Other things that people talked about were pricing and costs not being right, business model not matching, very user unfriendly types of products or services. And all those kind of things together are really elements of what it means to have your product or service fit with a market. And so it's really an incredibly common reason for businesses not making it. It's that critical to be focused on it, both early in your business and, as Shannon said, as you kind of move through the process. I had an example. What I will say is the worst time to get your first customer inputs or feedback is when you launch. That is the worst possible time to get your customer engagement and feedback, because it's the most expensive. Rework is most costly. It's a really challenging time if that's how long you're waiting. And I have an example of a company that I worked with. It was a small European company. They'd spun out of academia, spent a lot of time working on their technology, but in a very insulated way. And then they decided that they would take what they were offering essentially as a service to a few local clinicians and try to package it up and turn it into a product. So they just packaged what they did in their lab and then attempted to sell it. And unfortunately, what happened, that didn't go very well. So the very first customer they had ended up completely abandoning the project. The second customer spent 2 months trying to bring that product up and functioning in their lab. They also abandoned the project. The third customer took 4 months to bring the product up and functional in their laboratory. And, it was these are all things they could have learned about had they spent time prior to launch working with customers directly and getting input and feedback and saying, what if we did this and that kind of thing. And sadly, 3 years later, that company still has less than 10 customers as they are having, it's tough because they're still searching for that product market fit. But now they've got more engagement. So hopefully, as you do engage and you can learn and act, then you can make progress, but they're still working on it. So it's not a happy road if you wait too late.
Yeah, you would think all these companies, before they do all this start sale and all the development, this is the first thing they should do. But you will be surprised how many companies are skipping this step. And you just gave a really terrific example. So now I want to ask from a practical perspective. So as a company, how could they create a simple, actionable plan for getting customer inputs to find this product market fit?
Yeah, I think there's so much, available literature. There's so many videos, guides, etc. In a way, it can have the counter effect. It can make you feel like it's an overwhelming task that you have to learn a lot about in order to actually use it. But I think there's a really simple way to think about it that I've used, and I think anyone could use, that would get you over the hump of actionability. So I want something I'm really going to do. And that is to really simplify your thinking. What do I wish I knew? What information don't I have right now? That could be about the customer. It could be about the product, the feature, the market, but focus in on the key thing. What do I wish I knew? And who might know that answer? Guess what? A lot of the facts you need to make decisions are not inside your lab notebook, are not inside your business plan necessarily. They're not happening even when you're talking to investors, which is a critical moment to have insight. You need to go talk to the people who are going to buy this or who are stakeholders in the buying journey. And then the third question you ask after what do I wish I knew and who knows it is when do I need an answer? Because this is going to frame your action plan. I need an answer to this in 4 weeks. Great. So then it's really straightforward. I'm going to start to implement answer this question, who has the answers, and get it done on time, and then put that to work. And frankly, it's a virtuous cycle. Once you start talking to people who are stakeholders, even if they don't turn out to be your ultimate customer and somebody adjacent to them does, or further adjacent to those people, you learn a ton like, oh, the buyer is someone different than I thought they were. Oh, the buying decision turns out to be totally predicated on how much money the physician gets out of this. Not what I thought, but surely helpful. And I think that it's it's very satisfying, and it can be a very motivating activity for you, even though you may have approached it like, oh, another thing to do. So I then say, look, you can rinse and repeat. This basic framework of what do I need to know, who knows, and when do I need an answer can be applied throughout the product development process.
So can you explain in detail regarding this like advice, especially in the first two items you mentioned?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. I think obviously, we'd start with what do I need to know? What do I wish I knew? That very first sort of question. And I think it's important to frame it as more of jobs to be done. So what ultimately are we trying to accomplish? Is your potential customer trying to accomplish? And understanding that, like kind of from a broad point of view, is a better frame than making it too specific up front, because you want to understand kind of a broader picture, particularly in healthcare, which is a complicated ecosystem. So framing things as jobs to be done. I need to diagnose a disease. I need to decide if my patient should be admitted to the ICU or not. What is your real job to be done? And then it's also really critical to understand what is the current status quo. So how is this job being done today? And then from there, kind of what works, what doesn't work. How do things change through time? Or is there some element of that kind of happening as this job gets done? And as you kind of explore what is the job to be done, what's the status quo, that illuminates for you, well, then who knows about it? As you think kind of broadly about, let's say I'm going to make a decision about admission or not admission, that helps you understand who all the stakeholders might be. So there's hospital administration, there's an ER physician, there's a nurse, there's lots of elements of making that decision, and you want to understand how you kind of fit into that. I think the other thing that's really critical to say in terms of thinking about stakeholders in healthcare is I think there's a minimum of 5 things you need to be thinking about. The first 4 are very classic, and it's the 4 Ps in healthcare. So patients, providers, payers, and producers. And the 5th would be buyers. And that's really understanding what Shannon just talked about, is how are buying decisions made? You will end up potentially interacting with some people, as Shannon illuminated, that you maybe weren't thinking about. And how does procurement play a role? So there's a lot of elements that you need to understand, maybe a little bit beyond the 4 Ps. And thinking of the 4 Ps, patients, I think it's really important to consider them as well, and how they consume information, actions they might take, how understandable is my solution for a patient. And physicians have very similar kinds of questions that you'd be working through with them. Additionally, how does it impact workflow? So where does it sit inside a physician's day workflow routine? Are there handoffs you need to be mindful of? That could be in terms of a patient gets maybe moved from one area of the hospital to another based on a decision that you're making or an intervention that you're leading. Or it could also be about data handoffs. So I need to make sure I'm generating information. Where does that need to go? How does it need to get there? That kind of thing. Payers, it's always important to be thinking about them and trying to understand what is it they need to know and understand in order to cover the intervention that you're working on. And then finally, I think producers, typically this is going to be us, right? As a startup or someone with an invention, a medicine, we're the producer. But it's important to think through who other producers are that are stakeholders kind of in this overall workflow, and understand how they might be helpful, where it might be an interface that you need to solve. If we were thinking about diagnostics, for example, you'd be thinking for sure about how do I interact with Epic and Cerner and make sure I'm transitioning data to laboratory information systems and EMRs appropriately. So just kind of really thinking broadly about who the stakeholders are across what it is you're trying to achieve.
So it is really important. I want to echo that the first step is you need to find out who you want to reach out. Who are those stakeholders relevant to your business? So then the next step is most people struggle. How can they find the people they want to reach?
Right. Well, this is a lot easier now. And I think that's kind of lucky. You know, we're in a digital world where people like us are having conversations online. There are folks who are publishing in blogs, in newsletters, in journals. There's all kinds of meeting venues for people to talk about areas of interest. So if you're in a particular disease area and you'd like to know who the thought leaders are, it's not that challenging to do some legwork online and figure out who's leading the conversation, which is terrific. Although I will say it's not always easy to access all of these folks. So this is where your network comes in. Clearly, you know somebody, right? You're a human interacting in the world. So you start with who you know and who you work with. But as you have access to people like advisors, like investors, or you meet people who act as advisors or investors based on their digital profile, this is a great place to get started. Hey, I'm working on an incredible treatment for diabetes. I saw that you're investing in this area and I'm looking to reach out to a few thought leaders in this space. What a great way to connect yourself and get a little introduction to who they know and who can help you. Now, not everybody's going to jump up and down to help you out, but frankly, it doesn't take an excessive amount of time to get to a minimum amount, just sort of like getting started amount of people to connect with. I tell people, let's make this very achievable. Let's start with a simple, again, simplified processes, make everything doable. So let's make a reasonable guess as to the 5 people we might want to talk to and just go see if they turn out to be the 5 people who have the information we need. If nothing else, those 5 will generate, let's say, 5 more that will give us an even sharper vision. Well, 5 outreaches and 5 follow-ups will not derail your other, R&D work or your fundraising work. So it's definitely achievable. And it's worth putting the time in because you get this really rich data and you start to have relationships. So in the end, you may end up talking to 50 people because 5 turned into more. But now you can have a bench of like 10 or 15 people to go to who have really incredible answers. And quite frankly, in my experience, almost everybody I've met in this ecosystem wants to help other people out in some way. Now, there's a limit, right? But realistically, if you can articulate, hey, we're working on this challenge, and these are the things we're looking for, I've really rarely found somebody who said, I just don't have any ideas about how to help you out.
Totally agree. And even as investors, we help each other. We share the tools with each other and we share our opinion. And also this is a beauty in Silicon Valley. You have a lot of like this meetup event and also this networking thing. If you want to find someone, you can.
Yes, I really agree. So I think perhaps the challenge has been, maybe it's overwhelming. I don't know how to fit it in. Let's make it simple. So we have 3 questions. We have a goal of meeting 5 people and seeing where it goes. And then I tell people to plan your time budget. Over the course of 1 to 4 weeks, you want to get 10 things done, maybe 30, depending on how active your question is and how big the network you have to reach. But these are 30-minute conversations that can now happen on Google Meets or Zoom. You don't even have to travel to meet each other, and are easily cultivated digitally, although I'm really glad to say we're starting to meet in real life again, so that's even better. But it's not dependent upon everybody's coffee meetup schedule lining up. And again, I can't overemphasize, like, advisors and investors really, really want to know what you're up to. So take advantage of that.
Well, can I also use this opportunity also to promote? Actually, we also have our MedLabs Healthcare Accelerator that run together with the ZGC and also GHIN, and we're helping those early stage healthcare company that has a need to reach out also to all the stakeholders and of course and like other help. So this is also one channel.
Exactly. I mean, why not start there? So you're in this accelerator, take advantage of everything you've got going for you.
Yes. So a follow-up question to what Shannon just shared during this conversation. So how, as the company want to help or support, how to maximize the conversation and make sure they learn what they want to?
Yeah, I think, to Shannon's point, we want things to be actionable and simple. And I think I really have two pieces of advice around maximizing your efforts in this area. And the first is actually to listen. So I think sometimes in thinking about these engagements, and also when we get kind of caught up in the excitement of our idea and what we're working on, we may be thinking, when I go talk to customers, I need to tell them all about my product and help them understand and maybe sell them a little bit. And actually, you don't want to do any of that. This is not about you selling or you talking. It's really about you listening and observing and being curious and asking questions. So that's my number one piece of advice is try not to over explain or sort of talk too much. Even though you're excited, you'll get a chance. And then the second piece I would say is for each one of these engagements, to really tailor what you're doing very specifically to what it is you need to know. So there's lots of ways you can have an engagement with a customer. So one example might be if it's pretty early and I'm trying to understand how something might be used clinically, I might start with that status quo exploration. What are you doing now? How is it working? What's not working? And kind of ask as many questions as possible and let them lay out their world for you. So try not to lead too much, but be curious and let them fill out that space for you. And then you can ask them how might they change things? Or if you're ready with a potential MVP or a TPP, a target product profile, you could kind of present that to a clinician and say, well, we're working on something like this. It's super high level, not super detailed with tons of features and all that, but a high level sort of description, and ask them, what would you do with something like this if you had it? And let them tell you kind of how that might work. Because by making things open, you'll create the space for learning. So you're not pushing sort of your hypothesis on them. You let them fill out that space for you. Workflows are another thing you might want to be exploring. We talked about that a little bit earlier. And this is about finding the right person. This is a great place once we can spend more time physically together, where if you can physically observe a process, it's really helpful. It can be quite illuminating. Maybe you can only see part of the process. Good questions to ask are, well, what happens before? Like, what happens before this? What are the steps before? And then you can also, of course, ask, what happens later? What happens after this is done? To kind of learn more about that stakeholder. Like maybe we understand this part of our job to be done, but we don't understand this part. And workflows are a good way to kind of find some of that stuff out. You might also have really specific product design questions. Let's say you have a device or a diagnostic and you're building a piece of equipment and you don't know, should the user interface look like X or Y? Or is this hard to open and close? Like, you may have very specific kind of design questions, and those are also great opportunities to be in front of customers and get real feedback. And the good news too about doing that work directly with customers is usability is a requirement for the FDA. It needs to be documented as part of your DHF, and having these kinds of doing these tests, and they don't have to be fancy. They don't have to be fancy at all, but getting real engagement from your customer and real feedback, then you can document it. It becomes part of your DHF as well. So you're kind of two birds with one stone. It improves your product design and you're working on your documentation for regulators at the same time. So there's lots of, depending on what kind of question, what your what is, there's lots of ways to get really valuable feedback from customers.
I love it, two birds, one stone. Relevant for. Yeah, so now you mentioned about the timing. So can you give us some example how this works in different stage of the product development?
Yeah, I'll start. I think I'll start with an example from like very early in product design. So we were engaged. I worked on a project in the area of NASH. And what we were exploring was potential for, biomarker diagnostics in the United States. And where we started was with providers. So not in the laboratory, which is where the actual physical product is used, but we started with clinicians and what were their needs. And we did exactly kind of what I've been describing, what's working for them, what's not working for them, what is the status quo? And then we presented a TPP. Well, if we could make a test that looked like this, how would you use it? And what was great about that is we didn't get the answer we expected. So we had an idea about potentially replacing existing testing methods, which are primarily imaging and liver biopsy. Liver biopsy is in fact the gold standard, but obviously very invasive, and also has sampling bias, and there's definitely problems with it. But what we learned as a result of this conversation with clinicians is they would likely not wholesale replace anything, but do at least two methods for cross sort of comparison. And because the way these methods work, they don't always identify exactly the same patients. So physicians were more likely to view it as an add-on tool versus a replacement. And that helped us think through things like, how should we then design our clinical trial? Before, we hadn't built anything, but let us think really early about how do we want to design our clinical trial, even thinking about sample procurement for testing in terms of feasibility, in terms for looking at your performance. You might procure different samples with that knowledge versus what our original hypothesis was. The other thing is we also asked physicians, did anything change knowing that there are many treatments in development for this disease? And hopefully one of them at least one of them will come out and be successful, because this is a very prevalent problem. And so we asked them too to think through, okay, well, how would you use it today? Does that change in the future? And so it was a very, very interesting conversation, and it allowed us to make decisions early that absolutely helped us design a better product, and also for sure saved us money by not going too far down a path one way without kind of getting that input.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge loss, especially in this particular sector. If you can catch your mistake in early stage, that can really save you a lot of money. So now you mentioned, let's say about like a launching stage of the sample. Are you willing to share, let's say in a later stage or mid development stage, give any sample example?
So I think you're going to ask a bunch of questions. So as Erin alluded to, they now knew the direction to take their clinical testing in terms of validating against a gold standard and how it fit into a portfolio of assays that were going to be used versus a transformational replacement. I think that once you're in the process of design, you're going to face many, many questions of what I call A versus B. Is this better or is that better? And what matters? Like if you were back at talking to the clinicians or you're talking to the people running the assay, does it matter to you that it takes 15 minutes or 100 minutes? Does it matter to you that the result is colored or not colored? Like little things can make a difference. It matters a lot if there's a device involved. It can matter how you interact with it. Like, wow, this is hard to use. It only works for people who are tall. I mean, really things that seem obvious, but only when you put it in front of people. So because you've had this relationship, hopefully you started early and talked to folks, you now have a group of people in your, contact list who know the answers to certain things and then can help you find other people who know the answers, so that when you're in the midst of product development, the answer to my third short question, when do I need this answer by, is usually yesterday, or I wish it was yesterday. So I definitely know a question. I know I need somebody's help and I want it fast because we need to make a decision. Almost no one I know is saying, let's just take a very slow time to develop our product. So they would like to have a fast answer. Now is the time to create something simple, a little model, a picture, literally a picture, draw a picture in PowerPoint. It does not have to be fancy. And go back to the people that you were talking to answer that question quickly. It does two things. One, it maintains that reciprocal relationship with people who have insight, who may throw in a whole whammy for you, like colored. Heck no, I don't want any assays that require that. And they also, it gets your whole team behind it. Everybody is, it's non-arguable. If it's just Shannon wants something, that's one problem. But if it's clear that the clients need this to be successful, everybody acts a lot faster. It's an unassailable single point of truth. Yeah. And the most important takeaway here is it prevents guessing. You can guess as a hypothesis, but you don't have to go on guesses all the time.
And it's a good way to maintain the relationship. Yeah, sorry, Erin.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's, and sometimes, you know, you'll find in an A/B test that the answer is both.
Yeah.
And the answer can often be both based on segmentation. So a small customer wants A and a large customer wants B. So your answer then is, oh, it needs to be configurable. It isn't A/B. I have a both and requirement that maybe you didn't know about before. And I really can't sort of stress enough how valuable it is to have this core, like a core group of people you can reach out to cultivate these kinds of relationships. Because when you are in these later stages of development, you really do need to know quickly. I know Shannon and I've talked about a project that I worked on where the engineering team said, we need to know if it should be, you know, A or B. And literally the product manager didn't know. So they made a guess. We formally call that a working assumption, so it doesn't sound as bad as a guess. But we also got from the engineering team, what they said to us is like, okay, well, you can go find that out, but we need to know in 5 days. After 5 days, we will have progressed the design to a certain stage where it becomes harder and more expensive for us to change our minds. So we let the project team dictate to us, the technical experts doing the actual building the product. I can only wait for 5 days. So we got an answer in 5 days, and it turns out that our original guess was wrong. And so we went completely the other direction. And what was great about that experience is instead of it diminishing credibility of the product manager, it actually improved it because they had recognized, they admitted that they were guessing, then they worked to find an answer and delivered it on time for the project team. So it actually made the team stronger in terms of decision-making and kind of moving forward. So what maybe felt like it would be an unpleasant experience potentially was actually very positive. And then that model has continued to work in that team.
It is true. Like engineers or scientists, that they tend to just like find, once they are like set a goal, just like stick to that panel for quite a long time without really looking at a larger picture. So that is very common. So my next question is, we talk about all this benefit and also the advantage why we want to, as a company, they want to spend first some time to doing some research, but then to really truly find a good fit. But what really gets in the way of people doing it?
Yeah, so I think that the first reason is that people did do something like this at the beginning or at a point. And so they took that first compass reading. I'm envisioning holding a compass in my hand and going, okay, there is north. And they went after it, but then nobody looked at the compass again. So because they got busy, and as Ella just alluded to, we're scientists, we're engineers, we're we're driven by knowledge building, and we want to make progress. And there's, definitely a crucible effect of being in a small company and, kind of keeping up with what you need to deliver and on their timeline. And so people drift basically away from the true north because they're not using these techniques on a regular basis to keep close to their customers. And it's not because they're not bright. They're amazing. Everyone in this community is just kind of mind-blowingly bright. It's that the test, learn, build philosophy needs to be brought to the customer market fit activity on a regular basis just like you do when you iterate your experimental plans in the lab or in the engineering lab. And so really you have to make a commitment to making it a regular part of your relationship with your customers. We talked about that in this presentation, but what I think derails people is that once they get that first reading, there's maybe not a framework for continuing to manage that relationship. Here's where what we've just talked about together with Erin on the regular check-ins with the same people or people who are related to those people kind of keep your compass pointing north and keep you on track. So commit to making this a habit, just like you would make, recording your results in the lab notebook a habit, or any other major kind of milestone for the company. I would really ensure that we don't fall into the one and done mentality. Like it's not done once and then we don't look at it again, or thinking of it as a tick box, like, yes, we have product market fit, and then moving on and not revisiting it. So I think that's the biggest sort of overcoming that challenge. The next is that the how-to, which we hope we added something to in this conversation. Let's make it simple. Let's make it very achievable. Everything we need to do is reducible to a few simple tasks and a very achievable network building. And finally, there is, but I think this is diminishing, there are times when you find that people are really stuck in bias, which is like, if I have a brilliant idea, why do I need to get validation from everybody else? My brilliant idea, my brilliant medicine stands on its own. The science has our back. And I think that is a great starting place for anybody. Like if you've got great science supporting your idea, well, congratulations, wonderful start. But your product doesn't live in your head, or it does live, but that's the extent of its life. If you want to live in the market, you have to actually make that amazing idea even better by figuring out where it fits in the market. So if in fact you're talking to someone who's concerned that checking in with the customers is not a very innovative way to validate your idea, I think the solution is, well, it's only going to be successful if it actually makes it, it's kind of Darwinian. If it can't live to succeed to the next generation, then you really, it's not as satisfying for you as the inventor or your team as the creators. So it's worth investing in validating product market fit, even if your idea is in and of itself fully brilliant. No product exists in a vacuum. So one of the thought leaders in the space of product market fit is Steve Blank in that whole lean launchpad area. There was a really compelling quote from the 2013 HBR article talking about the lean launchpad method, in which Steve articulated that in most industries, and I think this is true in ours as well, customer feedback matters more than secrecy and more than product pipeline. So interesting, right? All those things we're doing, which is great that we're doing it, we need to promote that customer relationship to the same level in our work plan. Those are the reasons I think people struggle to do it.
So basically, we can summarize the points you mentioned to how to be successful running a company. What is characters a great entrepreneur should have? Yeah. Today we really cover a lot of perspective and also different level of how to really find a really great that market fit. So can you summarize or give some take-home message to our audience? What do they need to prepare, and also the message you want them to remember?
So I know Erin and I will both want. Maybe Erin, go ahead, you start and I'll follow up.
I hope that even though we talked about it at the beginning, but I hope that what people will take home is how critical this achieving this product market fit is to your startup success. It really is the difference maker. And I also hope that people will take home, you can totally do it. It's actually not that hard. You just have to make a commitment. So it's really important, and you can do it. It would be kind of my take home message. Shannon, what do you want to say?
I would just add to that. Yeah, I think this investment of time is on par with your intellectual property for ROI. So please do spend the time to build it in. It will not eat up all of your daytime. I think you can do this with, a commitment of, I don't know, a few hours a week at most. So it's very manageable. I think it's the practice of framing questions and getting answers makes it easy. I think it's very achievable. I affirm what Erin is suggesting here. And if you do it enough, it's just a practice. You won't have any trouble keeping it going. Keep iterating, build a community of people you trust. This will pay you back in spades. Like having happy, interested stakeholders who believe in you will be great for fundraising. It will be great for business building. It's really worth it. And, we know that it's really just a matter of committing to the practice.
Very nice, very nice. So I see there are some questions from our panelists. And actually there's one particular question for Erin. How do you identify the first group of physicians talk to?
Well, I think Shannon sort of touched on this briefly, and really what we do is look for, we need to obviously understand we have some idea of the job to be done or the clinical area that we're interested in. And then we go looking for physicians who might know that. And the places we can look, you can look for who's publishing in this area. Many specialties have dedicated conferences. That is a really great place to find and talk to people. Digestive Disease Week sounds maybe funny, but it's a really great meeting if you're in that space. There's all kinds of experts there to talk to, and you can get your picture taken with a walking intestine. Well, when you could go in person anyway. So I do my legwork first digitally, looking for kind of who's publishing, who's available, and then you can look to see ways you might be connected, and look for ways to get like a warm introduction through your network, which Shannon also talked about. So those are the kind of tools I would be using: who's publishing, who's on society, who's on working groups, working on the same problem that you're on.
Patient advocacy groups.
Yep.
Very, very active and network happy. Yeah.
I hope that's helpful.
It does. I got another question. Actually, it's for me.
Yeah.
So it's saying it's from Steve Hess. Ella, great content from Shannon and Erin. Spot on. How does the VC world value this information in their decision-making process? So I think there are a lot of very overlapping part of what Shannon, also Erin shares today. When we look at the company or look at the portfolio, marketing, the potential market size is definitely what we need to focus on. We're always saying that, hey, we would like to find some really fancy product, find a niche market, but sometimes that could also mean it's very dangerous. It probably doesn't really have a great product market fit. Mm-hmm. It may be really like a novel, but however, it's probably too pioneering that so far all this there are no, for instance, physician or hospital. There's just like no place to be for this to be applied or to be used because there's a lot of other element that hasn't really been there yet. So it's just like a way too early for investor. It's not saying that idea may be is really a bad idea, but from investor's perspective, the risk definitely overweigh the potential profit. And when we look at also a product that we're not familiar with, we need to also go to the expert. As they just Shannon and also Erin mentioned, we also need to go to those stakeholders. We need to ask their opinion. A lot of times we for instance, we also go to some physician, all the funds have our own advisor and in particular area. and ask there, hey, do you really think that, for instance, this imaging or this device could really replace what we have right now in the current hospital setting? We have also no clue. So it's very, very similar. And also this is what we observed. A lot of, it's very, I think today's topic is so practical and it's very, very valuable because it's really true. We do really see so many companies after they spend so much time, energy, and also money to develop the product and also doing a lot of work. And then they find out, hey, the market is now there. And we were really surprised. You should have done the work before. You shouldn't like wait this to the last minute. So this is basically what we observe. Hopefully that could answer the question.
Made me think of connecting the two questions. I'm in the middle on my Zoom screen, so I'll point to the two of you in a second. So if I had a preliminary investment from Ella's fund, I would be starting there. Like, who do you know? Who's your advisor? Who have you talked to? And then I go straight to those people and really get to the bottom of it. Because even if they have potentially bad news for you, like the thing you thought was true isn't true, find it out sooner. Find out really soon, then you can shift over and you can go, oh, we thought this disease indication was going to be the very best choice, but our molecule could also work in this disease indication. And now I know kind of how to flesh out the success story of who it's going to be. And then I can also use my advisory network to find out which other companies are buying those assets. How do we know what they're looking for? So now you're really lining up the future of the business. And it's really fun because everybody's kind of aligned in the goals. Well, it's fun for me. I think
it is. So we got another question from Lucy Curtis. Are there any tools recommended for startups to analyze their market fit? That's a great question.
Yeah. Well, the classic is the business model canvas. And that's, easily available online. I have done product market fit work in a spreadsheet. I have done it on a Trello board, Kanban board. I think the core tools are having the framework of who you want to capture information on. So that's where the business model canvas will tell you about how to identify potential customers and what your value proposition is for them. So why do they want to buy from you? That's a really helpful tool. The other tool that is extremely helpful is mapping your ecosystem. So just with sticky notes and a whiteboard or whatever it takes, figure out who's related to whom. Oh, this product is purchased by so-and-so, used by so-and-so, paid for by so-and-so. That helps you have a visual roadmap that you can augment and change. And there's tools for that online through the Lean Launchpad materials online, but a million free resources exist in this space. So I would say those are great places to start. If you do nothing else, just ask those 3 simple questions and fill in your Word document and you'll be off and running.
Yeah, I would really double down on the business model canvas, particularly because it ties together. Shannon actually talked about both elements, but one of the things that you will end up doing then is you will have to define value propositions for every stakeholder that matters, particularly in healthcare where the user is not typically the payer. And you have to be talking about value proposition across multiple stakeholders. The business canvas model can just give you, it's not a burdensome thing. It's a quick and dirty thing. It doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be actionable, but it gives you a framework for kind of just laying that out in a simple way and kind of getting your head around it.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And also you gave a really a great canvas. Now we all I read this down as well. Okay, okay, so let's see, do we answer all the questions? Let's see. Oh yeah, thank you, Shannon, Erin, and Ella, for the great sharing.
Thanks for that.
Wonderful. Wow, today is I also learned a lot. Thank you so much for all this insightful sharing, and I believe our audience also learn a lot and can also benefit a lot from today's talk. Thank you again, everyone, and also our dear audience. Hopefully you can also find today's panel to be really helpful. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see you all.
Bye.
Bye.